Hello and thank you for joining me today. We're going to be doing a cow portrait today. I have done some before and I think we did one in watercolour quite a while back. If you haven't seen that, I'll put the link up here. But today I was going to talk about more the structure of the face and the actual drawing, and I'm just going to do it using the ink pens. So this is one of my own cows. I'll put the link to this photograph in the description below. And we're just really going to do the actual face of the cow. So we might put a bit of the shoulder in just to indicate where her shoulders are, but we'll concentrate more on the proportions of the face. So I'll just prop that up there. Now to begin with, I'm going to start with a pencil just to get some guidelines in. And so if you look at her straight on, the easiest shape to begin with, and we'll start quite high up on the paper and then we can fit most of her in, plenty to make her nice and big, is this curve here, which is the top of the skull. So just get that curve in, and then over the top of that later on we'll come back and put some of those shapes of where the hair is coming over. Now another shape that's very important is the eye socket. So we're thinking about the skull here. If you look down, you can really see the shape of those eye sockets. So these are just guidelines for us to work to later, and we can rub them out. So now if we look at the width of the face, so if you get your pencil, measure the width of the face there, then look and see how many times it goes in to the rest of the shape. So to here, it's about 1.5 to the bottom of her chin. Now when you're looking at cows like this, be very careful that you don't mistake the markings for where something finishes. It can be tricky, especially when you've got markings that come round the eye and things like that, distinguishing just whether it's at the actual shape of the animal or where the marking is. You might be mistaken for thinking this is the end of a chin. It isn't, that's a neck hanging down. This is the end of a chin here. So you really need to look very, very carefully. She just happens to have a white neck underneath. If you wanted to alter the drawing and make that black, then you could do. Because it's just a marking, you can alter her markings to make it look more interesting for yourself and get some contrast in. But this black bit here is where her chin is, not this here. So it's little things like that when you're doing animals, that particularly when they've got very distinctive markings, is to really look at what's the animal underneath and what's the marking. Similarly here, she's actually, I mean, you won't be able to tell from that distance, and it's only a very slight thing, but the bone of her shoulder's actually here. This line here is just a marking where the white finishes and the black starts. It's not the actual line of her shoulder. So just look out for things like that. Okay, so where were we? So we were measuring, and we thought that the width of her face across the widest part, which is across her eyes, is the same as 1 and sort of 2/3 of to the bottom of her chin. So if we look at that, we'll go 1, and then we're about there somewhere, so we can put a mark. Okay, now if we look again, the width of her mouth there is very similar to the width of the top of her head. So just compare all the time. So that's going to come, if we bring the pencil down to about there somewhere. So again, that's a chin. So we've got a head at the top, a chin at the bottom, and so far just those lines where her brow bones are, if that's what I want to call them. You can see the cheekbones underneath. We're not going to put too many guidelines in. That's probably enough. Just we could put the shape of her actual mouth underneath. Now then, let's look at her ears and how her ears are attached. So we've got this shape here, which is an inverted curve, and then it joins. So look at where it joins, behind, in line with the top of the eyelid there, and same on the other side. So it's a particularly good photograph because she's looking straight at us. It's obviously more complicated if she's looking, you know, with one side showing more of her face. Now I've just drawn her ear in there, but actually we should have measured it, shouldn't we? So the inside of her ear, again, is pretty similar to the top of her head and her nose. So just look at that, the inside of her ear to the top of her head. And it's sort of 4 lines. She goes up and across, down and up. So they're not circles, they're quite angular. Now if we look carefully, again, because it's all black, it's difficult to tell, but this line needs to carry on, as does this one. because this attachment, this muscle behind, is behind this piece here. That's the open part of her ear. Now I suppose before we start with the pen, we'll just put the line of her actual face in. She's actually got quite a chubby face compared to some. And again, some of that's her neck behind, it's not all her actual face. So I'm just going to put the pencil away now, and then we can start and refine by really looking and observing. And I'll start with the medium one. So we'll start at the top because it's easier not to have your hand dragging over your work. Now if you look right at the top, so we put this straight line in, but now that we're coming to put the detail in, we actually need a tuft. It needs to be this shape with a little bump on the top of her head, which is where the skull is going up, and then put the hair around it, and the hair goes like this to either side, like she's got a parting, and then she's got some little fluffy bits that are a bit unruly as well. But look at how that hair is lying on the top there. We need to go quite dark in places as well. We can come back and put some of the tones in, more shadows in later on, to indicate more where the markings are. But it's all going from this central sort of parting. She's got a few little flicks up there as well. So each cow is going to be quite different here, because each cow's hairs are going to lie slightly differently, and obviously the markings are going to be different. So we're not really worrying too much about the markings, we're worrying more about the direction of the hair. So if you look down here, those of you who have horses and maybe aren't familiar with cows but are familiar with horses, you'll be familiar with them having little stars. And we've got one here, can you see there's all the hairs are radiating out of that. Now that's not going to be the same on every animal, and we'll leave that for now. That's directly in between her eyes, so we'll get some of that in before we come and put that back there. So she's got these long hairs here and then much smoother hairs on the rest of her. So we'll start and put the ears in, but we'll follow the muscle around with the lines and the hairs. So it's actually coming, if you look very closely, now if you look at a cow in the field, you'll see how they can move their ears and how they move them quite a lot. Very attentive, they're very nosy, which is obviously where the saying comes from, nosy cow. They like to know what's going on. So these muscles on the backs of their ears, you can see the lines of them there, because they can move around and move this ear quite a lot. So once you get to understand all that, it makes it much easier to draw when you understand the anatomy and how things are fixed together. So before I do this bottom line, and this is important, you need to get the tag in. So if you do it first, obviously your lines are going to be in the wrong place. You need to go around that. And if you have one that doesn't have a tag in and you're in the UK, then it's not strictly legal. They should all have tags in, unless if they've been ripped out, they're supposed to be replaced straight away. So you'll see that every cow you see has a tag in, and you can make up the number there. You can put it on if you want, or you can just do a squiggle for the numbers. And then of course we're seeing the back side of that as well. And when we put these tags in the cows, it's just like when we have our ears pierced. It's just a short, sharp shock like we've all had when we've had our ears pierced. It's nothing that's going to hurt them. So if you look inside the very middle of the ear here where it goes in, there's it's more skin coloured, but she's quite a dark animal actually. She's got a lot of black hair, so it's not just as easy to see on her, but towards the edges of the ears there's much more hair. So take some lines to reinforce the shape of the ear and some to get those hairs in that are on the edge of the ear, and also some shading. We'll come back and do the tones later, look at where she's darkest and lightest. We'll just get the drawing in first really. So now let's look at this eye. So the bottom of the eyelid is more or less in line with where her ear comes in. We can see that. So this is the shape of her actual eyelid, more or less like that. And then her eye, the bone of her eye, we can see some lines coming down and down from this big bone here. That's all. So the shape of the socket is as important as the shape of the eye itself. So get the shape of the socket in first. So can you see here, got another line that's also, I don't know whether you call it a cheekbone or you know, the socket of the eye. You can really see where the bone is there, and you can really see where it is there. And these lines here, if we get all those lines right, then you're going to get the character and the shape of her eye right. And they've got really long, as we know, they've got really long eyelashes that show off the side of the eye there. She's got quite a big eyeball. It comes down. So look very carefully and take your time with the eye. If you want to do it in pencil so that you're sure, then that's fine as well. And just if we look, she's catching the light on the corner of her eye there, so you'll want to leave the white of the paper for that. So there's a line behind, which is the back, some of the back of her head there, and then we'll leave a very thin strip of white to show that we've got the highlight of her eye there. And the rest of it is very, very dark. So reinforce some of these lines going around her eye. Make sure those hairs are going in the right direction. And this line here. And like I said before, she's got quite a chubby face. She's got this, like I said, some extra coming out here that she probably shouldn't have. She's, I think, been eating a bit too much. And maybe it's just the way she's standing actually to that side slightly. So also get these lines underneath to indicate where the lids are. And as well as making the shape of the eye socket, these lines also take us down to her nose to point to where that central bone is of her nose. That's going to take us right down there to her nose at the bottom and her mouth. So if you look now coming down, I don't know if you can see that line. Again, it's difficult when it's all black. This is a very distinctive shape, curves at this edge here. So as you get to the bottom there, we've got it goes slightly out and curves. Same on the other side, slightly out and with a curve. And then it's actually pretty straight across the bottom of her, well, it's actually the top of her mouth, the bottom of her nose. Apart from that little indent there, can you see where I've gone slightly up? And then let's take these lines on the side of her face to where they were. There's a few because her neck's sort of all creased up a little bit. So again, look at where the hairs are going, which direction all this is lying. So the nose itself, again we've got to look carefully at which is nose and which is markings. It looks like a nose is going off to this side, but it isn't. A nose is completely straight. It's here and it's here, but these markings are taking it off to this side. So ignore the markings, just look at the hair. Don't look at where it's white and where it's black. Look at the hair and the shape of that skull underneath. It's straight down there and down there, in line with a head here and a nose here. And then we've got this line. Now a lot of people draw this line and they draw them like a cartoon. We don't want that line there. You know, this is all one part, it's all one thing. We don't want to complicate it by putting that line there. Just makes it, in too harsh a way, just makes it look like a cartoon. So let's get her nostrils in. So they go around and down. And the same on the other side. And then they're quite dark inside, they need to be There's obviously no light getting in there, they need to be quite dark. So how you do your shading is up to you, whether you do cross hatching or whether you completely block it in. Now can you see she's got a few whiskers coming off her nose as well? She's actually got a few dribbles. We won't put that dribble in, we'll just put a mouth underneath. And she might have had a bit of grass or something in you could have put in. Like I said, she's got hairs as well down there. So now if we look at the top of it, obviously she's got markings on her nose as well. So this part of her nose around here, the side, is covered in black hair still. The front of her nose is skin. So although it's black, there's some pink there as well. This is actually skin here. So it's not, we're not having it like, you know, all hairy like the rest of it. It's actually skin. So just leave that for now and bring those hairs down onto it. So we've made that line I was talking about, but not by drawing in an actual line, just by indicating where the hair stops and the skin starts. We'll go all the way up her nose, putting those lines where they should be. And like I said, she has that, do you remember I said she had that star right in between her eyes? So that's going to be about here somewhere. And that's just going to give a bit more character and make it more her. Now if we're just painting any cow, and it doesn't matter really where you're indicating the markings and the direction of the hairs and things, if you're actually doing a portrait for somebody of their favourite cow or something, you would obviously need to make sure the markings are exactly right, because the person who owns the cow would definitely recognise if you got the markings in the wrong place. So we'll come over and do the other ear. So just the same as the last one, we've got that muscle going out there. The edge of her head you can see there, I didn't really indicate it much there, it's sort of there as well, and because her ear is actually behind that, but like I said, they're quite hairy, and you can see those lines of where the muscle's lying as well as the hairs. And on this side she doesn't have an actual number, but it is marked, but she has a much smaller tag. So I'm trying to go quickly because I don't want you getting too bored, but I wanted to do a full video rather than skipping through things, so that you could see exactly where I'd gone with the drawing and how I'd approached it. Okay, so we've got our second eye here, so let's make sure she's lined up. Again, if she was at an angle, they might not be necessarily lined up, but she's pretty much straight on to us. And again, we've got that shape of the brow bone. Now when we come back later and look at where things are darkest, we might put some extra lines on some of these. Like I said, for now we're just getting things in the right position. And you really, if you're a beginner and you're worried about getting things in the right place, then do it in pencil. Go over with your pens afterwards when you're happy where everything is, and then just rub your pencil lines out afterwards. It's the easiest way to go about it. Now did you see that I just line things up, so just look all the time, think where does that corner of the eye come in relation to the nose and things like that, and just keep looking back and lining things up together. And again, look at the shape of where the hairs are going around that eye. Again, the lid part here, you'll see I've not put many lines on there. That's because that's pretty much sort of skin as well, really, rather than very hairy. She's not catching the light much on this eyeball, but I will leave some a bit of white in there so that she looks like she's got a bit more life to her. So don't do it completely black. And again, the lower lid as well, we need to indicate where that is and put some shadow in underneath her eye. So I'm sure you've seen plenty of cow drawings, paintings where the eyes are completely in the wrong place. A lot of people tend to do them like I've said before, like a cuddly toy or like a human, sticking the eyes on the front. The eyes are at the side. They're an animal that needs to be aware of predators, so their eyes are on the side of the head. She looks a bit grumpy actually, doesn't she? But maybe she does in the actual picture, I'm not sure. I think I've got that eye, that line there making her look a little bit fierce. So now we've got the basic features of the actual face in. I think we will indicate where the shoulders and the legs are, so not too much, nothing too complicated or detailed, just a few lines just to show that she's attached to an animal, you know, her head's attached to an animal. So they've always got this line down the centre of the neck, which is quite distinctive. And this is all coming this way. So use your pen to indicate the direction of those bones and the way her back's lying. You know, move your arm around her. This looks quite skinny at this side, but that's how the way she's standing. We're not actually seeing very much of this side of her. Okay, so now we've got the basic shape, and we'll go back and look at where she's absolutely the darkest. I was going to perhaps use a slightly different pen, a darker one maybe, and put some of the shadow in. So let me just check that. Actually, I think that's going to be a bit too dark because we've done it we've got quite a lot of line on it. So let's use a fine one and put some shading in actually. So can we see here it's going to be very dark, and inside her ear where the light's not getting to. It's very difficult on a black animal to then actually come and make a darker, but we'll do that. So I'm just going to cross hatch, but I'm going to cross hatch sort of in the direction of the way things are going. So she's going to be dark here, and making it dark here around that sort of shows that brow bone off as well. You see how that's lifted that, brought that brow bone out. So vary your lines, but try and keep them sort of in the direction of the way the hairs are going. Again, like I said with all my videos, you will have a lot more time to spend doing all this cross hatching and refining where these lines and hairs are going. I just want to get it done quite quickly so that you're not getting bored watching me. So all I'm doing now is looking at her and keep looking back at the photograph and seeing where it's absolutely the darkest and putting some extra shade in. So we'll start with the ears. We've got that showing off the shape of the brow there, but now we'll reinforce the shape of the ears by getting nice and dark inside the ears. So just cross hatch all the way along inside. If you've got more time, you can go much closer to the ear tag and things like that and make it much neater, a neater shape in there. Just to give you an idea of where we're going to go with these tones, I'll do it quite quickly. So can you see how that's starting to build up the shape of the animal by getting those darks in the right place? And if while you're doing this you notice some things that you've missed out in the drawing, some hairs or a shape somewhere, get those in as well. Again, putting these lines in, we're getting her even more grumpy looking, but if you look at it, she definitely is darker just above that brow bone, because obviously the light is going to hit the brow bone. Now we'll just think about where she's black. So although she's black, she is catching the light quite a bit, but we do want to let us see where the white is. So where the black is, again, we've already got the lines of the hair in the direction of the hair, so if we just cross hatch over the top, it's just going to help us to show where she's black and where she's white. So just don't put your hand on that central part where we want her to stay more white. If you did this on a watercolour paper, you could come along afterwards and actually put where the markings are, put some extra paint over. So all the time following the lines that you've already got and getting some depth into her. So let's have a look here. She's quite dark, isn't she, under her eye here, in that curve, and here. And the edge of her face, because we need that to stand out from her neck and her back. So like I say, if you're doing a cow and it doesn't matter what cow it is, it's not for something special, it's just a cow, use the markings to make the shape of the cow stand out. Alter the markings if you have to. So I've gone quite black down the side there just to make her nose stand out, and I'll do the same at this side. The shape of her nose down here. Now really think about getting nice and dark in here. Again, there's a lot of detail in there that I haven't put in that you will have time to. You know, get some of that shading in to indicate where she's very moist on the end of her nose there, by leaving, you know, some of that white paper to show the moist areas and doing more shade around. Some little marks on her nose, these little dots. Again, they don't have to be exactly where they are on her. And this is obviously going to be in shade because her nose is casting a shadow over the bottom of her mouth there. And just make some of these lines a little bit stronger and a bit more distinct whilst you're on with it. And some of this shading around her eyes really brings out the shape of her eyes, so make sure you get that right. Spend a bit of time on that, more than I'm doing. So I'm just going to shade over all the bits that are black very lightly, because I've already got that shape in and on most of the tone underneath. So as long as we don't go too heavy over the top, we're not going to lose those lines that are already there. We can put some extra shadow in very quickly. Just makes the form stand out a bit more. And then again down here underneath. So like I said before, she's white underneath, under her chin here, but I'm going to just ignore that and make it all dark so that her mouth shows up more. I'm not going to carry on and do loads and loads of her body, but if I was carrying on to do all this, I would make sure that there was a contrast here between her mouth and her body, because obviously that head's going to be casting some shadow on there. But I'm not going to finish all that. Whoops, my picture's fallen over. And again, I'm just going to ignore the fact that she's got white on her back there to get the shaping of her back. But I won't come as dark nearer to her face. And I'll get the shape of her neck in here as well with some extra shadow. And I'll tell you where I need shade. This back ear tag, something that we've missed out, because that's obviously casting a shadow behind there. Okay, so if you're going to go and put colour on it, and obviously you'd rub out your pencil lines as well, but if you're going to go and put colour on that now, you could really bring out the markings more. Get a nice bright yellow for her ear tags, because that's very distinctive of Holstein cattle, that they've got that nice bright yellow, and then just a touch of pink on her nose. In fact, we could do that with a little bit of Inktense, so I'll just pause the camera one moment. Okay, so I've just got some Derwent Inktense, and I'm just going to put a touch of colour on. I didn't plan on doing this, but actually I think it'll just bring her to life a bit. So for the skin, we've got a pinky colour here. Let's have a look. Just test them on a piece of paper. I don't think I'm going to use it. I'm going to use this one here and add a little bit of the pink to it. I'll look up what this one's called, and then I'll pop it in the description below. So plenty of water just to make it a thin covering where the skin on the nose is. Don't want it to look too harsh. And then for the yellow, we'll just take that straight from here. So I'm just wetting the brush, lifting that colour straight off the block there. It's quite a small brush. What number are we on? A number 3. And that just makes her a bit more interesting, doesn't it? And actually, if we have a look at her, and you look at the colour of her nose, she's got quite a bit of yellow in her actual nose as well. So let's just add some of that to that little mix there. Put a touch of that. Whilst it's still wet, just let it go in. Like she's got the sun shining on her nose. And I'm just contemplating now whether we put that black on or not. I think if we make a nice loose mix of the black with plenty of water, we could just do that. Let's have a look, see what it looks like. So plenty of water, and let's just indicate where she's got her black marks. So all of her ears. We don't do it too, you know, do it nice and loosely. Don't cover it completely, leave a bit of light and shade there, especially in that eye. So all this is the black Inktense straight from the palette, with a tiny bit, or quite a lot, sorry, should I say, of water in it as well. It just shows how economical these Inktense are really, because all I've got is a tiny touch of pigment, and I've covered a whole face everywhere where she's black. But letting that light shine through and letting the pen show. You wouldn't want to put it on solidly and cover up all that nice drawing that you've done underneath. So I'm not sure how long that took me, perhaps about half an hour or so, was it? Maybe more than that. But you can just see how you can quickly get a nice shape. And with just a tiny touch of colour, you can actually bring them much more to life. So if you spend a lot longer on that, you get a lot more detail, like I say, around those eyes and the nose especially. Get some moisture in there, get the way that the hairs are all going, the direction of the hair. And think about where that hair's going around the skeleton of the animal. So just to recap, we need to think about where the bones are, which I've said before, and measure things against each other and line things up against each other. So look at where the eye lines up to the nose, look at where the nose lines up to the head, where the nose lines up to the shoulder, and just compare all the time measurements and where things line up. So again, ears are usually, nearly always, the same size as the top of the head, which is the same size as the nose. So you've got those 3 things to work with. Get the length of the face right in comparison to the width. So it's from the centre of the ears more or less, isn't it? We did it from here, didn't we? We did across there, and then it was 1 3/4 or 2/3 of the way down. So measure all the time. And look how small her eyes are compared to a lot of drawings that you see of cows. Because they're on the side of the head, we're not seeing all of them, and there's quite a width between their eyes, not like our own. And I think that's sometimes where we make mistakes, is we sort of compare animals to ourselves, and because our eyes are much closer together than that, we tend to do them. I'm just making a slightly stronger black, and I'm just looking at where. So you could do this as well. You could come in with some extra black and put where you've done your darker areas, you could go over with a little bit more, but we could go on forever doing this. It's just I think we should probably time to leave it now. That's the great thing about Inktense, it's just really handy just to pop a little bit of colour onto some of your sketches. Okay, so I hope that information was useful if you were into drawing animals and you want to learn how to draw animals. I'm going to do a full playlist of animal drawings. We did, what did we do last week? Oh, we did a lion last week, so I'll add this cow to that playlist, and as we go through 2018, I'll add more and more animals. So I've started with quite a few new playlists since we came into 2018, because some of the other ones were getting quite full, all the things I'd done in 2017. So if you want to go along to my channel, you'll see that we've got some new playlists going, and I'm going to do ones on the various media but also on different subjects like the animals. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. Any comments, if you want to pop those in the comments below, and I'll put any links that you might need for the photo reference and things like that in the description below as well. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.